There comes a quiet season in life, not marked by birthdays or milestones, but by a shift in how we experience the world. It's a subtle turning inward, often arriving when we least expect it. Perhaps it's during a slow morning, when you find yourself watching the light spill across the floor with no urgency to move, or maybe while standing at the sink, hands in warm water, eyes drifting to the garden outside, as you wonder how so many years passed like a soft breeze through leaves. It's in these unspoken moments that a deeper understanding begins to form, that true strength is no longer about force or dominance, not about pushing harder or proving anything to the world. Instead, it begins to reveal itself as something far more profound, the ability to remain steady when life is not. Strength becomes less about the body, and more about the resilience of the mind, and more precisely about the stillness within the heart. But let me ask you something that may stay with you longer than you expect. Why is it that some elders, despite immense loss, radiate a kind of peace that seems untouched by circumstance, while others struggle to cope even with the smallest setbacks? Is it just temperament? Is it fortune, or family, or faith? Or is there something deeper, something hidden, not in what happens to us, but in how we meet it? You may have heard voices say that when life is hard, suffering is inevitable, and there's truth in that. We are human, and pain visits all of us in different forms. But what if I told you that while pain is part of life, suffering, that lingering heaviness, the inner turbulence, the fear that won't let go, is something we can transform? What if strength was not something we are born with or without, but something we could build, gently and patiently, no matter our age? This is not the kind of strength you'll hear about in motivational speeches. It's not about pushing past limits or silencing emotions. It's not about clenching your fists and charging through. This is the strength of a quiet mind, the kind taught in Buddhist practice, where clarity, presence, and discipline meet to create something unshakable. And so if you've ever whispered to yourself in the silence of night, "There must be a better way to carry all of this," then stay with me. This is not a lesson in toughness. It's an invitation to walk a gentler path, to rediscover the calm beneath the noise, and to build a mind so steady, so rooted in wisdom, that no storm can pull it apart. Let us begin. Part 1. Suffering is the teacher, not the enemy. There is a quiet truth many people only come to understand later in life. Suffering doesn't mean something has gone wrong. In fact, it may mean something very important is being revealed. As children, we're often told to avoid pain at all costs. We're taught that if we hurt, we must fix it fast. If something breaks, we should cover it up, move on, and pretend we're okay. And maybe that worked for a while. But as the years go by, especially in our later chapters, we begin to see how life, with all its joys and all its losses, brings with it a different kind of wisdom. One that whispers, not shouts. One that says, "Don't run from suffering, learn to sit beside it." In Buddhist teaching, this understanding is beautifully expressed through the parable of the two arrows. The Buddha once explained that when we experience pain, a physical illness, a betrayal, a loss, that's the first arrow. It strikes, and yes, it hurts. But the second arrow, that one we shoot ourselves, it's our resistance, our judgment, our fear, our desperate wish that life was something other than what it is. And that second arrow often wounds us far more deeply than the first. Take, for example, the story of a widow in a small Thai village. Let's call her Meena. Her husband passed away unexpectedly, and she spent months overcome with grief. Not just because of the loss, but because she couldn't stop blaming herself. If only I had noticed his symptoms earlier. If only I had insisted he see the doctor. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, The grief was real. That was the first arrow. But the guilt, that was the second. One day she visited a forest monastery where an elderly monk gently told her, "My dear, the river will carry you, but only if you stop clinging to the branch." What he meant was this: suffering is natural, but holding on to it, replaying it, making it your identity, that's what keeps us stuck. In Buddhist philosophy, suffering, dukkha, is not a punishment. It's not even an enemy. It is the path. As the first noble truth teaches, there is suffering, but the truths that follow remind us that suffering has a cause, and it also has an end. And the path to that end begins with understanding it, not avoiding it. For many of us over 60, life has already delivered its share of pain. The death of loved ones, health struggles, fractured relationships, dreams that never came to pass. But instead of asking, "Why me?" what if we asked, "What is this moment here to teach me?" That single shift from resistance to curiosity is what begins to transform pain into wisdom. Think of it like this: clay must be pressed and shaped by pressure before it becomes a pot. Steel is only strong because it's been through fire. And just the same, a wise mind is not born in ease, but in the deep work of living through difficulty and choosing not to harden, but to open. So next time suffering visits, and it will, don't treat it like an intruder. Invite it in, offer it tea, sit with it, listen, and when it finally rises to leave, it may just leave behind a gift, the quiet, sacred beginning of an unshakable mind. Part 2. Practice stillness. When the storm hits, it's often said that a calm sea never made a skilled sailor, and life, as we all know by now, is anything but calm. In youth, we try to outrun the storm. We build our boats strong and fast, thinking speed or strength will carry us to safety. But as the years pass, we begin to realize that the most powerful thing we can learn is not how to avoid the storm, but how to remain still in the middle of it. This is where the Buddhist path gently enters, not to fight the wind, but to teach us how to anchor the mind. Because when chaos swirls around us, the only place we can find real peace is within. Stillness, in the Buddhist tradition, is not passive. It's not giving up. It's not indifference. It is instead an act of great courage. A Zen master, Tishnach wrote, "Feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor." In other words, we don't stop the wind, but we can train the mind not to be blown away by it. Let me share with you the story of Mr. Raymond, a soft-spoken man in his 70s who began meditating after his wife passed away. At first, he told me, he couldn't sit for more than 3 minutes without tears welling up or memories flooding in. But he kept showing up, not to escape the storm inside, but to sit with it. Slowly, breath by breath, he discovered that stillness was not the absence of pain, but a sacred space that allowed him to feel without drowning. Over time, he began to describe his grief not as a crashing wave, but as a tide, rising, falling, and eventually retreating, as all things do. In Buddhism, the practice of mindful breathing is not merely a technique, it is a doorway back to the present moment. It is how we bring the wandering mind home. When we breathe deeply and consciously, just one full, intentional breath, we signal to ourselves that we are safe here and capable of meeting whatever life brings, not with panic, but with presence. There's a reason monks and nuns don't rush. Their footsteps, slow and deliberate, are not lazy, they are awake. That's the kind of strength we can all develop, no matter how old we are. You don't need to retreat to a monastery. You don't need to chant or light incense. You can sit on your porch, close your eyes and breathe. That is enough. And here's something beautiful. The more we practice stillness in ordinary moments, the more naturally it arises in the difficult ones. Like a well-worn path through a forest, the more you walk it, the easier it becomes to find when you're lost. So the next time life begins to shake, don't rush to react. Don't reach for distraction. Pause, breathe, and trust that the silence within you is stronger than the noise outside. Because in the end, storms will come, but they don't have to take you with them. Part 3. The gentle power of discipline. There's a common misunderstanding that discipline is harsh, cold, or rigid, something strict, even punishing. Many people associate it with rules, restrictions, or the stiff routine of military life. But from a Buddhist perspective, discipline is not about control, it's about compassion. It's not about forcing yourself to be someone else, but gently guiding yourself back to who you truly are. In fact, the word for discipline in Pali, sila, is one of the pillars of the Noble Eightfold Path. And rather than being a tool of suppression, it is a path of harmony, a way of living with consistency, mindfulness, and intention. Now, think about this for a moment. In our later years, our bodies may slow down, our schedules may soften, and the outside world may expect less from us. But strangely, that's often when the inner world becomes louder. Our thoughts wander more, emotions can flare unexpectedly, and the structure that once came from work, family, and obligations begins to dissolve. What then keeps the heart anchored? Discipline, but not the discipline of pressure, the discipline of presence. Let me tell you about Mrs. Helen, a former school teacher now in her 80s, who began each day with a simple ritual. She would wake up at 6:30, wash her face in cold water, light a candle at her kitchen table, and sit in silence with a cup of tea for 15 minutes before speaking a single word to anyone. This was her way of beginning the day in reverence, not for any god, but for the opportunity to be alive. She once told me, "I don't do it because I have to. I do it because it reminds me of who I am." That is the essence of gentle discipline. Not pushing, but realigning. Not performing for the world, but showing up for yourself. The Buddha never taught us to chase after big, flashy accomplishments. He simply encouraged us to do the small things, and to do them with intention. Waking up without pressing snooze. Washing the dishes slowly. Speaking only what is true and kind. These acts, repeated with mindfulness, begin to shape a mind that is clear, calm, and resilient. Too often we wait for motivation to arrive before doing what needs to be done. But motivation is like the wind. It comes and goes without notice. Discipline, on the other hand, is the ground beneath your feet. It is the steady step you take, even when you're tired, even when you're unsure, even when no one is watching. And here's the secret. No one tells you, the more you follow through on your own word, the more trust you build with yourself. And that quiet self-trust becomes a wellspring of confidence. Not the loud kind, but the soft, steady kind that whispers, "I will not abandon myself." So if your life feels scattered, if your days blur together without shape or meaning, don't wait for clarity to find you. Create it, not with perfection, but with practice. Sweep the floor slowly, fold your laundry with care, sit in stillness for 10 minutes each morning, not to change the world, but to meet yourself. That is enough. That is discipline. That is power. Part 4. Letting go of what weakens the mind. It's a curious thing, how as we age we become wiser in so many ways, yet some habits cling to us like shadows we can't quite shake off. And often they're not the loud, obvious faults we expect. No, they're the quiet ones. The little daily patterns of thought and behavior that seem harmless, but slowly, gently begin to drain our peace, blur our clarity, and weaken the foundation of the mind. From a Buddhist lens, letting go is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong practice, and it doesn't mean rejecting or suppressing what we feel. It means recognizing what no longer serves us and releasing it without anger or guilt, but with kindness. There are 3 habits in particular that many of us carry unknowingly, and each of them, if left unchecked, eats away at our inner strength like water wearing down stone. First, complaining. Now, we all need to vent sometimes. It's natural to express pain, to share our frustrations, but constant complaining, that subtle, habitual focus on what's wrong, slowly programs the mind to look for negativity in everything. It trains the brain to see problems, not possibilities. The Buddha once said, "What you dwell upon, you become." So when we dwell in complaint, we become bound to dissatisfaction. Letting go of complaining doesn't mean denying what hurts. It means shifting our energy from blame to action, from passive despair to engaged awareness. Ask instead, what can I learn from this? What can I do? And if the answer is nothing, then let it be. Let it go. Second, the pursuit of comfort. This one is sneaky, especially later in life. We've endured much. We feel we've earned the right to relax, to avoid pain, to seek ease, and in many ways that's true. But too much comfort that turns into avoidance, becomes a soft prison. Growth, after all, lies just outside the edge of what feels easy. In Buddhist monastic life, monks deliberately practice asceticism, not to punish themselves, but to stay alert, to keep the mind sharp. They rise early, eat simply, walk barefoot, not because they must, but because they choose discomfort as a teacher. And for us, maybe it means walking a little more each day, or saying no to another hour of television, or facing that hard conversation we've been putting off for years. It doesn't have to be dramatic, it just has to be intentional. And third, excuses. Perhaps the most subtle of them all. Excuses often sound like kindness toward ourselves, don't they? I'm too old to change now. That's just the way I've always been. But beneath those words often lies fear. Fear of failure, of judgment, of starting over. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Nothing stays the same, not even our patterns, unless we cling to them. And the truth is, every moment offers a new choice. You are never too old, too late, or too lost to begin again. Letting go, then, is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's the quiet courage to release the mental clutter we've carried for far too long. Not because we're bad, but because we are finally ready to walk lighter. So ask yourself, gently, what have I outgrown? What am I still clinging to that no longer brings peace? What is it time to lay down, not in shame, but in freedom? And when you release it, you'll feel it, not just in your thoughts, but in your body, your breath, your very being. A spaciousness, a softening, as if your mind finally has room to breathe again. That is what it means to grow stronger, not by adding more, but by letting go of what was never truly yours to carry. Part 5. Transforming fear of failure into fuel for growth. Somewhere along the road of life, perhaps after that first deep heartbreak, or the job that didn't work out, or the painful silence of a dream that never quite came true, many of us quietly began to fear something we don't often name aloud. Failure. It's not just the falling down that hurts. It's the meaning we attach to it. We tell ourselves, I should have known better by now, or I'm too old to make mistakes. And slowly, without even realizing it, we begin to play it safe. We stop trying new things. We silence our ideas. We shrink to fit into the version of ourselves that feels least vulnerable to disappointment. But here's the quiet truth. Buddhist wisdom offers us, failure is not the opposite of growth. It is its soil. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha reminds us, just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, even so the wise are not affected by praise or blame. What this means is simple but powerful. Success and failure are both fleeting. Neither defines us. They are passing clouds. What matters is the sky behind them. Let me tell you the story of Luis, a 67-year-old man from New Mexico. After retiring from his job as a mechanic, he felt restless. His hands still longed to build something, and his heart, though nervous, nudged him towards something unusual: art. He had never painted before, never even taken a class, but something inside told him to try. His first attempts were rough. His neighbors teased him. His own inner critic shouted louder than ever. But instead of quitting, he reframed the entire experience. He told me, "Every time the brush slips, I tell myself, good, that means I'm learning." And with that one sentence, he did something profound. He turned failure into practice. This shift from fear to curiosity is one of the most transformative gifts of Buddhist mindfulness. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" we begin to ask, "What might I learn?" Because the truth is, no one who has ever grown, healed, or discovered anything meaningful has done so without falling, often many times. Even the Buddha himself, before his enlightenment, faced doubt, exhaustion, and temptation under the Bodhi tree. Yet he did not see those moments as distractions, but as part of the path. You see, growth is not a straight line, it's a spiral, looping back, falling down, standing up again. And for those of us who are older, we may feel that our chances are fewer, that mistakes are heavier, but this is not so. In fact, now is perhaps the most sacred time to embrace failure, because now we are wise enough to know that it doesn't define us. So the next time you hesitate to start something new, to learn, to speak up, to create, notice the voice inside that says, "But what if I fail?" and gently respond, "Then I will grow." Remember, broken soil is what allows seeds to take root. And every step, even the missteps, are part of the sacred unfolding of a life still beautifully in bloom. Part 6. Strength is quiet, not loud. In a world that often confuses noise with power, it can be easy to overlook the kind of strength that whispers instead of roars. But as we grow older, we begin to see, perhaps for the first time, that true strength doesn't need to be seen to be real. It doesn't stomp into the room. It doesn't shout over others. It simply is, like a deep current beneath still water. There's a powerful image in Buddhist thought, a candle in a quiet room. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't compete with the darkness. It simply glows, unwavering, steady, enough. That is the nature of inner strength. You may know someone like this, an elder who doesn't speak often, but when they do, everyone leans in. A person who walks into a storm, not with weapons, but with a calm heart. These are the people who remind us that strength isn't about overpowering, it's about anchoring. It's about remaining whole, even when life tries to pull you apart. Take, for instance, the story of Tenzin, a Buddhist nun who lived through the trauma of exile. She lost her home, her community, and many of the people she loved. She had every reason to be angry, bitter, vengeful, and yet when asked in an interview what her greatest fear had been during that time, she replied, "That I might lose my compassion." What kind of strength does it take to say that? Not the kind forged in fire and steel, but the kind that grows quietly in the heart that refuses to close, no matter how painful the world becomes. In Buddhist teachings, this is the strength of equanimity. a spacious mind, undisturbed by praise or blame, gain or loss, joy or sorrow. Not because the person no longer feels, but because they've learned not to cling. They've learned that emotions rise and fall like waves, but the mind can remain like the ocean, vast, deep, unshaken. Many of us have been taught that showing emotion is weakness, that crying means you're broken, that being calm in the face of cruelty means you've given up. But the truth is, the strongest person in the room is often the one who chooses not to fight, not out of fear, but out of understanding. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." And to love, truly love, in the face of anger, fear, or pain, requires a kind of strength far greater than the sharpest sword. So if you find yourself in a moment where someone criticizes you, misunderstands you, or tries to stir up conflict, pause and ask yourself, what would strength look like if it didn't need to prove itself? You may find it looks like silence, or a gentle word, or simply walking away with dignity intact. You don't need to win the argument. You don't need to be right. You just need to stay centered. Because true power isn't reactive. It's responsive. It doesn't seek control. It lives in surrender. It doesn't rise to every battle. It chooses peace again and again. And as we grow older, that becomes our greatest inheritance. Not loud victories, but quiet wisdom. The ability to hold our own in a world that pushes and pulls, and to say softly, "I will not be moved from what matters most." Part 7. Discipline over motivation. We've all had those mornings, especially as we get older, when getting out of bed feels like lifting a mountain. The ache in the knees, the heaviness in the chest, or simply that quiet inner voice that says, "What's the point today?" And on other days we wake up filled with purpose, energized, clear-eyed, inspired to make the most of our time. But here's the thing, motivation is a visitor. It comes and goes as it pleases. Discipline, however, is a companion, the steady friend who walks with you, whether the sky is clear or full of storms. Many people wait for motivation to arrive before taking action. They wait for the perfect moment, when they feel inspired, when the mood is just right, when energy finally returns. But as Buddhist wisdom teaches, impermanence governs all things, moods, energy, emotions. They rise and fall like the moon in the sky. And if we anchor our lives to that ebb and flow, we're likely to be carried wherever the tide decides to take us. Instead, Buddhism invites us to cultivate right effort, one of the steps on the Noble Eightfold Path. Right effort isn't about exhausting yourself or forcing things to happen. It's about the gentle, consistent return to the present. It's about showing up with care, again and again, even when inspiration feels 1,000 miles away. Let me tell you about Susan, a 72-year-old widow who once dreamed of writing a memoir, but always felt too tired, too distracted, too unsure. One day, she decided to try something simple. She would write just one paragraph every morning after tea, no matter how she felt, rain or shine, joy or sorrow, whether the words flowed or not. At first, it was hard. Most days, she stared at a blank page. Some mornings, her arthritis flared so badly she could barely type. But she kept going, not because she was inspired, but because she had made a vow to herself to honor her voice, even when it trembled. A year later, she held a finished manuscript in her hands, not because she waited for the muse, but because she built a rhythm rooted in discipline, not desire. And that's the heart of it. Discipline is love, made visible. It's how we care for ourselves, not just when we feel good, but especially when we don't. It's the act of sitting in meditation, even when the mind is restless, of preparing a healthy meal, even when we crave something easy, of taking a walk, reading a page, calling a friend, not because we feel like it, but because we value the life we've been given. The Buddha himself practiced unwavering discipline, years of daily effort, through hunger, fatigue and temptation, not to become superhuman, but to awaken to his own nature, to find peace, not when the world allowed it, but when the mind was trained to see clearly. So ask yourself, what could my life become? Not if I waited for motivation, but if I simply chose to begin each day with care, regardless of how I felt. Even the smallest effort, repeated with mindfulness, becomes a path. One step, then another. That is how rivers are carved through mountains, and in the quiet glow of that daily devotion, through the gentle force of showing up, not just once but again and again, you'll discover a strength that doesn't flicker with emotion, but burns steadily with purpose. That is discipline, and that, dear friend, is where transformation truly begins. As this quiet journey comes to an end, take a moment, just one, to notice how your heart feels right now. Has something softened? Has something been stirred awake? What we've shared together is not a list of rules, not a map to perfection, but a gentle reminder. You don't need to be a warrior. You just need to stop running. From the very beginning, we explored the truth that suffering is not the enemy. It's the teacher, the one who, if welcomed with presence, transforms pain into wisdom. We learned that stillness is not something passive, but something powerful, a refuge we build breath by breath. And we came to see that true strength is not loud. It's quiet, consistent, and deeply rooted in how we show up when no one is watching. We spoke of the value of letting go, not just of possessions or people, but of the invisible burdens we carry in the mind, the need to be right, the habit of complaining, the craving for constant comfort. We looked at failure and saw not shame, but soil, where growth quietly takes root. And we discovered that motivation may visit us occasionally, but it's discipline, gentle and grounded, that stays to build something lasting. So now I invite you, bless you, to pause. Sit quietly each day, even for just 5 minutes, not to fix anything, not to chase anything, but to remember who you are beneath all the noise. Let go of the old emotional habits that no longer serve the soul you've grown into. You are not the same person you once were, and that's not something to mourn, but something to honor. And above all, build your peace, not through force, but through intention. One breath, one act, one loving choice at a time. Ask yourself gently, what am I still holding on to that's asking to be released? What part of me is ready to stop striving and start simply being? What would it feel like to walk through the rest of my life with ease, not effort? This doesn't need to be a grand change. In fact, it shouldn't be. Let it be a soft beginning, a quiet turning inward, a return to what has always been within you, the stillness, the wisdom, the unshakable peace. If this message resonates with your heart, let it be the first step, not the last. Come back to this space whenever you forget. Revisit it when the world feels too loud. And if you'd like to keep walking this path of peace and presence with us, of Buddhist wisdom and calm reflection, I invite you to subscribe to Quiet Wisdom. This is not just a channel, it's a community, a place to rest your heart. Thank you for spending this time with me. Be well, be at peace, and most of all, be still.